This is Kathy from Gadget Stop 321, and today I'm going to be trying out Sailor Manyo Akebi in a variety of pens and nib sizes. Now, one of the things I've noticed about this Manyo line of inks is that several of them remind me of my favorite Iroshizuku inks, and Akebi is very similar to Iroshizuku yama-budo. So I'm going to start with the Pilot Extra Fine. Now, this extra fine is very, very fine, and I've noticed that it does much better when paired with a saturated ink. So let's see. Nice. This is it's about as pleasant of an experience as I could expect to have in a nib this fine. I like it. And you see it's a kind of a burgundy ink, but when you smear it out, the base color is a fairly bright magenta color. I kind of like it. So it's saturated enough that it's nice to use in this extra fine. And in the fine, this is very smooth. This is an old Hobonichi Weeks that I'm writing in. It's got a creamy paper. I thought it would look nice with this burgundy Akebi, and it does. And so Tomoe River paper is nice and smooth, and with this decently saturated ink and a nice smooth Pilot Fine nib, I really enjoy that. Okay, next I've got my Jinhao X750, and this ink looks good with this particular finish on this pen. This is a medium nib. Yeah, nice and wet, very pleasant. Next is my Jinhao with a 0.6 stub. This is very smooth and just looks really nice. And all of these pens I have just dipped in the ink. And in fact, this Nemesign, I enjoy using it for these tests because the nib just slides off very easily, and I can replace the nib with these two stub nibs. I've got a 1.1 and a 1.5 stub nib that I got from Anderson Pens. And this ink, the Akebi, is a little bit messier, or will stain your hands a little bit more. It's more saturated than the Haha and the what was the Neko? Hold on. Neko Yanagi. Those two, Haha and Neko Yanagi, were not quite as saturated, so switching nibs didn't get my hands as messy. And I think This one's the 1.1. I'm going to go ahead and dip it again. Make sure the nib's good and saturated. This ink is definitely thicker than the first two, the Haha and the Neko Yanagi, and tends to stick to the nib a little more. Man, that's nice. And this ink has some interesting characteristics to it also that I'm going to show in just a minute when this dries. I've got one more writing sample, the 1.5. I'm really having a blast with these replacement stub nibs. It's really fun to play with these interesting inks. You see different characteristics that you don't always see with the finer nibs, which is what I've always used, fine and extra fine, and the occasional medium nib. Okay. One thing I've noticed about the Akebi is that it does take a little bit longer to dry. I put the Nemesign back on. This is the Nemesign. Excuse me just a minute. Yeah, grabbed the wrong nib. I didn't think that looked wide enough. And you can see how the red in this will stain your fingers a little more. Okay. That's better. This is a fun nib to write with. All right, and I'm going to let this dry a little bit and show you some of the other ink samples that I already did. Let's see. This is my little ARC notebook that it's kind of like an ink journal. And just like the other two, the Haha and the Neko Yanagi, it feathers. It doesn't feather as bad as those first two, but yeah, this does feather on poor quality paper. But you know, the color stays the same. Even in the fine nibs, it's a good saturated magenta color. Actually, not magenta, more of a burgundy color. All right, and on my white Tomoe River paper, let's see, yeah, the fine nib, you see a little bit of shading in it, and I don't know if it's going to show up here, but there's a little bit of a halo that's like a green. Oh, you can almost see it there on that E. There's a halo of, I think it's green. Looks really, it's impressive looking in real life. It's not like an over-the-top sheen, just a little halo around the letters. Instead of a different color, it's got a halo of sheen. Let's see. And I didn't do the 1.5. I'm going to go ahead. This video might run a little longer. I'm going to write with the 1.5 on this white paper. I want to see if you'll be able to see the sheen even more. And while it's drying, we'll look at the cream colored Tomoe River paper. Alright, I'm going to give that a second to dry. And it's a little bit cloudy outside, so I don't have, maybe there on the A, you can see a little bit of the sheen. I don't have the natural sunlight coming in to help out with my lighting. There on the E, you can kind of, yeah, see it shining a little bit. But there's just a really thin halo around the letters, especially on these wider nibs. But I like this ink in all the nib sizes. It's very pleasant in these fine nibs, and it's a pretty color. And I wanted to show you on Rhodia. On Rhodia, I'm not seeing the sheen. It's still a pretty color, but you don't get the sheen. There's kind of there's a halo of darker ink, and that's kind of hard to see here in real life, but it's not just flat. There is a halo on the letters, and there's on the finer nibs there's a little bit of shading. So it's not just a flat boring color, but you just don't get the sheen. Now if I compare this to yama-budo, I don't have a whole lot of writing samples with it, but it is very similar. It would be difficult for me to tell these two inks apart. So yeah, if you know what yama-budo looks like. Now yama-budo, see, I don't have a writing sample of it on here handy on Tomoe River. I don't know if yama-budo will have the sheen that this one, that Akebi does. I don't know. A very pretty ink. I'm very happy with it, and it's a good ink to use in any nib size. So if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.